Imagine this, a luxury cruise liner gently swaying on the ocean, filled with excitement, lavish parties, and the promise of a relaxing getaway. Among the passengers, you have some well-known faces, none other than Barron Trump, the son of the former president, and a mysterious figure by his side, someone only a few people seem to recognize. For a moment, everything seemed calm, a peaceful escape from the world outside. But, as fate would have it, that tranquility was about to shatter. In the most unexpected and shocking way. It started off like any other day on board. The ship was cruising through serene waters, the sound of laughter echoing from the lavish dining halls, and passengers soaking in the beauty of the open sea. But there was one individual on board who had no intention of enjoying the vacation. Like everyone else, Captain Reynolds, a seasoned no-nonsense man, with a reputation that preceded him. His crew respected him, but many passengers had noticed his unusual behavior. For some, it seemed like he was always watching, always lurking around, his eyes scanning every interaction, every guest that came near. But things took a bizarre turn that no one saw coming. Barron Trump, along with a woman whose identity remained a mystery to most, had been enjoying a quiet evening at one of the ship's upscale lounges. Their presence didn't seem like a big deal. After all, they were just passengers trying to have a normal time. That was, until Captain Reynolds, uncharacteristically agitated, walked into the lounge. What happened next would leave everyone speechless. Eyewitnesses say the captain's face was pale, his movements sharp and erratic, as he approached Barron Trump and the woman by his side. At first, no one could understand why the captain was making a beeline for them, but his intentions became all too clear in an instant. A confrontation erupted. Words were exchanged, too fast and too heated for anyone to follow. Then, as if on instinct, the captain lunged forward. He reached out to Barron, shoving him roughly against the bar, while the woman screamed, trying to intervene. But that was just the beginning. Security rushed to the scene, yet Captain Reynolds, usually the embodiment of control, seemed lost in a frenzy. His face twisted in anger, as if he'd been driven by something far deeper than a momentary lapse in judgment. Barron, stunned and confused, tried to process what was happening, while his secret companion stood frozen, her shock mirroring the chaos that was unfolding. It was hard for anyone to make sense of what had just transpired. Was it an isolated incident, or was there something more sinister going on behind the scenes? What followed next only added to the confusion. The ship's security team was quick to separate everyone, but the drama wasn't over yet. Instead of being removed immediately, Captain Reynolds vanished into the depths of the ship, disappearing without a trace. No one knew where he had gone, or what he was planning next. And Barron Trump, he was left reeling, shaken by the unprovoked attack. And now even more questions were beginning to swirl around him. Why was he even on the ship? Who was this mysterious woman with him? And what did Captain Reynolds know that no one else did? The passengers, who had witnessed the ordeal, were left with a growing sense of unease. Was this a one-off incident, or was something darker brewing on the horizon? The crew members seemed unusually tight-lipped, and rumors began to spread like wildfire across the ship. Some passengers whispered that Captain Reynolds had been acting strangely long before this event. Others speculated that there was more to Barron Trump's presence on board than meets the eye. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a random incident. Something was going on behind the scenes, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. As the night stretched on, the ship continued its journey, but the tension was palpable. No one could shake the feeling that the encounter between Captain Reynolds and Barron Trump was just the beginning of something far larger, something more dangerous. The secrets on board the ship were slowly starting to unravel, and the strange behavior of the captain only added to the growing mystery. What had driven him to attack a young man, seemingly out of the blue? And more importantly, what connection did Barron Trump have with him? And what was his relationship with the woman at his side? Just when it seemed like the ship might return to some sense of normalcy, the most shocking development yet occurred. A series of unexpected events unfolded, leaving everyone on edge. What had begun as a tense confrontation soon spiraled into a web of lies, secrets, and unexpected alliances, with Barron Trump and his mysterious companion caught right in the middle. The cruise liner, which was supposed to be a safe escape from the world, had turned into a battleground for truth, power, and hidden agendas. With every passing hour, it became more apparent that Captain Reynolds wasn't the only one harboring secrets. The more the investigation deepened, the more unsettling the revelations became. The passengers who had been minding their own business only a day ago were now drawn into something far beyond their understanding. What was the real story behind the captain's unprovoked attack? Why had Barron Trump and the woman been targeted? And what shocking twist awaited them all in the days to come? As the investigation grew more intense, the walls began to close in on everyone involved. But the truth was still elusive, buried under layers of mystery. The questions multiplied with no clear answers, and the tension on board reached its peak. What had started as a seemingly random outburst had spiraled into something much darker, and everyone on board was about to find out just how deep this mystery went. But what happened next? Well, that's a story for another time. Stay tuned, because the shocking truth is just around the corner. As the days passed, the mood on the cruise ship grew increasingly tense. The incident with Captain Reynolds had left an indelible mark on everyone aboard. What started as a shocking confrontation was now the talk of the ship. Whispers floated through the hallways, in the restaurants, and around the pool. No one knew exactly what had happened, but everyone seemed to have their own theory. And the more people talked, the more bizarre the speculation became. For Barron Trump, the attack was the beginning of something much larger. He had been trying to keep a low profile on the ship, hoping to escape the constant media scrutiny that had followed him for years. He had never been one for the limelight, preferring to stay out of the public eye. But now it seemed his every move was being watched. The mysterious woman with him. Who was she? Barron had kept her identity a secret, even from his closest circle. Was she a girlfriend, a friend, or something else entirely? The secrecy surrounding her only fueled the curiosity of the passengers and the crew. As the days went on, Barron found himself more isolated than ever. The security staff, though visibly tense, had begun following him around the ship, not overtly, but just enough for him to feel their presence. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The crew members who had always been friendly to him seemed to avoid eye contact, and he overheard them whispering behind his back. It was clear that whatever had caused Captain Reynolds to snap wasn't just some random outburst. It was part of something deeper. Captain Reynolds himself had vanished after the attack, and no one had seen him since. The ship's captain, his superior, refused to comment on the matter. It was as if the whole thing had been swept under the rug. But there was a strange undercurrent of fear running through the crew. They were nervous, on edge, constantly checking over their shoulders. Something about the way they moved, the way they spoke to each other, made it clear that they knew something the passengers didn't. And Barron was beginning to suspect that Captain Reynolds wasn't acting alone in whatever strange plan was unfolding. The more Barron thought about it, the more certain he became. There was something sinister at play on this ship. The attack on him was no accident. But why? What could a seasoned captain like Reynolds have against him? And why had he attacked so suddenly without warning? Barron couldn't shake the feeling that there was something personal about it. But what? His thoughts were interrupted when he found the mysterious woman standing in the corner of the ship's main deck, staring out at the endless horizon. She hadn't spoken much since the attack, but Barron could tell she was just as shaken as he was. Her eyes had a faraway look to them, as if she were lost in thought, but her tense posture told a different story. She was on edge, constantly scanning their surroundings, as if she feared something. Barron approached her carefully, not wanting to startle her. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away, but after a long pause she spoke, her voice low. "I don't think we're safe here, Barron. There's more going on than you realize." Barron raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" The woman took a deep breath, looking over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was listening. "This ship, it's not what it seems. And the captain, Reynolds, he's not the only one involved. There's a group, a hidden faction within the crew. They've been watching you, and they've been watching me." Barron's heart skipped a beat. "Who are they?" The woman shook her head, her eyes darting nervously. "I don't know for sure, but I've heard things. Rumors. They've been tracking your every move since you boarded this ship. And it's not just you they're interested in." The tension in the air was palpable. Barron was struggling to process everything she was saying, but he couldn't ignore the truth in her words. He had always known that being the son of a former president made him a target, but he had never imagined it would lead him into a situation like this. What had started as a quiet getaway had quickly spiraled into something far darker, something that threatened his safety and his life. As the night wore on, Barron and the woman kept to themselves, avoiding the prying eyes of the other passengers and crew. But the unsettling feeling that something was about to happen never left Barron. He could feel it in the air, a sense of impending danger that grew stronger with each passing hour. And then, in the dead of night, everything changed. The ship's alarms went off, blaring through the hallways and rattling the walls. Barron shot up in bed, his heart racing. He had no idea what was going on, but he knew it couldn't be good. He rushed to the window and looked out into the dark sea, but there was nothing to see, just endless water and the distant lights of the ships. Emergency beacons. Frantically, he grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. The ship had been cut off from all communication with the outside world. Panic spread through the corridors as people scrambled, unsure of what was happening or how to respond. But Barron had a sinking feeling in his stomach. This wasn't a routine drill. It was something much worse. The woman burst into his room, her face pale with fear. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We don't have much time." Barron's mind raced as he tried to make sense of her words. Who's coming?" Before she could answer, the door slammed open and a group of security officers rushed into the room, their faces grim. They didn't speak, but their presence was enough to send a chill down Barron's spine. Something was wrong. Something catastrophic was unfolding on this ship, and Barron was right. In the middle of it, he had to act fast. As the security team closed in, Barron realized that he had just become a pawn in a game far bigger than he could have ever imagined. And as the walls of the ship seemed to close in on him, he knew that the truth was about to come crashing down, whether he was ready for it or not. But would he survive what was coming next? Or had he just made the biggest mistake of his life by trusting the mysterious woman and ignoring the danger that was lurking right under his feet? The answers, as always, were just out of reach, and the clock was ticking. The tension in Barron's chest grew heavier as the security team moved closer. Their eyes locked on him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being suffocated. The woman, standing at his side, seemed just as fearful as he was, but her expression was hardened, as if she had seen something like this before. Barron's mind raced. What were these officers after? Why were they now closing in on him like they were prepared to arrest him? And more importantly, what had happened to Captain Reynolds? Then, one of the officers stepped forward, holding something in his hand. It was a small black device. Barron didn't know what it was at first, but the officer's words made it clear. "We know about your connection to the group, Barron." Barron's blood ran cold. "What group?" he asked, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to sound calm. He glanced at the woman, but she seemed just as in the dark as he was about where this was going. The officer didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, pushing the device towards Barron. As soon as Barron touched it, the screen flickered to life, showing a series of encrypted files that were clearly connected to his family. Barron's heart skipped a beat as he realized what was happening. These weren't just random files. They were part of an intricate plan to control and manipulate the information surrounding his family's political influence. The captain's outburst, the strange behavior on the ship, it all suddenly made sense. Someone had been pulling strings behind the scenes, someone with a powerful agenda, and that someone had been using the ship as a cover to get to him. The woman, her face now pale, stepped forward. "Barron," she said in a low, urgent voice, "you don't know the full story. It's not just about you, it's about all of us. This ship, the crew, everything. Captain Reynolds was never supposed to attack you. He was part of a plan to get you to see the truth." Barron was struggling to process everything she was saying. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in, but it was hard to accept. All this time, he had been thinking he was just on a peaceful getaway, but this was something much bigger, much darker than he had ever imagined. The officers, seeing the confusion on Barron's face, began to explain. The woman beside him wasn't just a random companion. She was an insider, someone who had been working undercover to expose a covert group of elites who were using the cruise liner to hide their operations. They had been watching Barron, carefully manipulating the circumstances to create an opportunity for him to unknowingly take part in their web of deceit. Captain Reynolds had been part of this faction, tasked with keeping Barron contained and under their control. But something had gone wrong. Captain Reynolds had begun questioning his loyalty, unable to carry out the attack as planned. His mind had cracked under the pressure, and he had lashed out, thinking it would stop the group from controlling Barron. But instead, it had made things worse, forcing the plan to unravel in a way none of them could have anticipated. As the officers spoke, Barron's mind clicked into place. The strange behavior of the crew, the hidden messages he'd overheard, the cryptic warnings from the woman. It was all part of the same dark puzzle, but it wasn't over yet. The stakes had been raised. There was no turning back. Just as Barron thought the nightmare might end, another figure stepped out of the shadows. Captain Reynolds himself. His face was drawn, tired, but he was alive. And he had something to say. "I never wanted this to happen," he said quietly, his voice shaky. "But I couldn't stop them. I couldn't stop the plan. I had to make sure you saw the truth, Barron. You're being used as a pawn in a game that goes far beyond this ship." The captain's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the truth. The cruise liner had been nothing more than a tool in a larger scheme, a place where powerful figures had been working in the shadows to control the flow of information and power. and Barron, whether he liked it or not, had become the focal point of their efforts. But now, with Captain Reynolds speaking out and the officers revealing their true intentions, Barron finally understood. The game was up, the group's plan had been exposed, and Barron had the power to stop it all. "I can't do this alone," Barron said, his voice steady now. "But together, we can make sure this never happens again." The officers, the captain, and the woman all looked at him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Barron felt in control. They had the evidence, the power, and the will to expose the group's dark agenda. The pieces of the puzzle had come together, and the truth was finally out. In the days that followed, Barron worked alongside the officers and Captain Reynolds to dismantle the hidden network operating within the cruise line. The ship, once a symbol of luxury and escape, had turned into a battlefield for justice and truth. The scandal rocked the political and business world as the group's influence crumbled. For Barron, the journey was far from over. The world would always see him through the lens of his family's legacy. But he had proven to himself that it could stand on his own. He had uncovered a massive conspiracy, exposed the corruption lurking in the shadows, and helped stop a dangerous plan that had far-reaching consequences. As the ship docked and the passengers disembarked, Barron stood at the railing, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The ocean was calm again, but he knew the world he had once known would never be the same. He had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to forge his own path forward. But as the waves lapped against the hull, Barron couldn't help but wonder who else was out there, waiting to pull the strings once again. The game might be over, but the battle for truth was far from finished. And so, as the cruise liner set sail once more, Barron knew that his story wasn't finished yet. The world had just gotten a glimpse of what he was capable of, and he wasn't done fighting for what was right. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Barron Trump was no longer just a name. He was a force to be reckoned with.